Hello. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 20 of Takeout by Margaret Maron. In mid-afternoon, Tilly turned from his computer screen with an air of accomplishment. Listen to this, Lieutenant. The deed to number 403 was registered to Charlotte Randolph 43 years ago, which puts it about 18 months after Marta Constanza's accident. Before that, the house was owned by a Matthew Littlejohn, who sold it to Benito Del Vico. Then who gave it to Randolph? Sigurd asked. Dinah Urbanska made a face. Poor Ms. Del Vico. Do you think she knew he'd moved his mistress practically next door? That was cruel, but convenient, said Lorry. Hence had been following his own trail of breadcrumbs. I went back and pulled up some old references to Franklin McCall. Who? The critic who just happened to be at that performance of La Boheme. I cross-referenced Benny Del Vico and got nothing. But with Benny Olds, he turned his computer screen around so that Sigurd saw black and white photographs from an old magazine. This is a historical website dedicated to the mobs of New York. He read the picture's cut line aloud. Man about town and music critic Franklin McCall relaxing with friends at Sardi's after a performance of the New York Philharmonic. Several men in black tie and dinner jackets were seated around a table thick with cocktail glasses. That's McCall, and that's Walter Winchell, and there across the table from McCall is Benny Olds. Are you sure? Asked Sigurd. The picture's not labeled. No, but he's mentioned in the text as hanging out with show business types. Like the way Frank Sinatra liked to hang out with mobsters in Vegas. Wait a minute and I'll show you. A few clicks later, and a mugshot of Del Vico flashed on the screen. Hence reduced it in size, then dropped it next to the magazine photo. Sigurd looked closer at the man who had employed her father's killer. Dark, curly hair, hooded eyes, and a sardonic smile that probably looked sexy to any woman he aimed it at. Wow, said Urbanska, looking at the first picture. He was hot. Albie was more dismissive. All men look hot in a dinner jacket. If we're looking for motives, said Hence, I think we just found one. Benny not only caused the accident, I'm willing to bet he's the friend who invited McCall back to another performance of La Boheme, saying it was to give the tenor another hearing. And Bloss was blackmailing her? Why else would she give him $500? For old times' sake? Lowry gave a cynical snort. Out of the kindness of her heart? If the poison was meant for Jack Bloss, that makes Matty Mouton collateral damage, Sigurd said. About that $20 Matty had, said Dinah Urbanska, who was beginning to feel she could hold her own with the others. Jack Bloss's sister said he wasn't crazy about tomato sauce, so what if he offered Matty that money and some of his lasagna in exchange for some of Matty's fettuccine? $20 for a serving of pasta? Asked Hence. Why not? He was hungry, and he was probably feeling flush, and if this was a first payment to keep quiet, he'd be expecting that there would be more from where that came from, right? It made a certain amount of sense, thought Sigurd, but poor sad Matty. Yes, he'd been on a path to self-destruction, but remembering the words of the woman who had comforted him after his cousin's death, she regretted that he'd found no closure. Tilly, take another look at that report on the hit and run that killed Area Edwards. See if the driver was ever found. The day had started with blue skies and sunshine, But by the time Sigurd and Hence got down to Vanderbach Street in the late afternoon, the sun had disappeared behind some heavy dark clouds that were rolling in from the west. After driving around the block, Hence gave up on finding a legal space and pulled in next to a fire hydrant. A light wind carried the smell of rain as they rang the bell at number 403. No response. Hence rang again with the same result. "Do we have Randolph's phone number?" Sigurd asked. Before he could check, she tilted her head to the left. Never mind. He looked in the direction of her gesture and saw Charlotte Randolph walking toward them from farther down the street, swinging an ivory cane. She hesitated when she saw them, and for a moment looked as if she might cross the street to avoid them. Then, with a visible shrug, she continued as she begun. She looked cool in a long gray and white print skirt and a loose white shirt belted at the waist. The skirt was made of a light material that brushed around her ankles as the wind picked up. When she was close enough to be heard, she said, "Sorry, Lieutenant, I let the time get away from me." The cane was evidently more for effect than necessity, because Randolph walked without using it except to help herself up the steep steps. Hence stood aside as she unlocked her door and led the way into her sleekly modern home. She stashed her cane in a tall white umbrella stand and flicked a switch to light the crystal starbursts that hung at varying levels from the ceiling above the large open space. "What about your attorney?" Sigurd asked. "He wasn't able to get away today, but he told me I was probably being overly dramatic, that it was quite reasonable for you to ask for a sample of my pills." She walked past the cluttered glass-topped dining table to the white chairs and couch near the large rear windows. "Looks as if we're going to get some rain." Outside, the wind stirred the trees and the flowering bushes for which Sigurd, having little interest in nature, had no name. "I'm going to have a glass of Riesling. May I pour some for you?" "No, thank you," Sigurd said. Randolph disappeared behind the mirrored screens that hid her butler's pantry and emerged a moment later with a crystal goblet of pale golden wine. "My assistant looked you up, Lieutenant. You and Oscar Newman. I have one of his pictures." "Oh?" "Upstairs," she added as Sigurd looked around. "Would you like to see it?" "Perhaps another time. Right now, we'd like to hear more about your conversation with Jack Bloss last Tuesday." "What more can I tell you, Lieutenant? It was purely innocuous. He gave me the program insert from that second night. We talked about old times, had a few drinks, and he left. I'm sure that being poisoned was the furthest thing from his mind." "Yet you gave him $500. Why?" She took a sip of wine, then set the goblet on the glass and chrome coffee table. I'm sure that you now know that he had a son that's been in a coma for years." Sigurd nodded. The nursing facility was raising its rates, and he was strapped for money. Jack may have belonged to a good union with excellent benefits, but the boy's mother took half his pension in their divorce settlement, and she balked at paying more for his care. She wanted Jack to either take him off life support or move him somewhere cheaper. I asked him what he was going to do. She reached for her wine glass as thunder rumbled outside. He couldn't bear to do either. He said that if I'd ever had a child, I'd understand. That I would want the best I could afford, and that I'd want that child to live forever. She shrugged. I felt sorry for him. So you gave him money. So I gave him money. Was it a one-time thing, or the first installment for his silence? His silence? For not telling how Marta Constanza happened to fall that night. Charlotte Randolph took another sip of wine and held the glass up to the light. Her hands were wrinkled and spotted with age, but her fingers were graceful as she wiped away a lipstick smudge. When she did not speak, Sigurd said, "We spoke to his sister." Sister, ah yes, that's right. Jack did have a sister. Was she there that night? No, but he was. He told her he was up on a catwalk and saw the whole thing. A man no one had seen before bumped Marta and kept going. He thought the accident might have been arranged by your new boyfriend. So I ask you again, Miss Randolph, was Jack Bloss blackmailing you because of the way Benny Olds made you a star? My my voice made me a star, she said sharply. My voice. Marta's accident just speeded it up a little. She drained the last of her wine and leaned back on the white couch with the goblet held loosely by the stem. As for what Jack thought he saw, it would have been his word against mine. He had no proof, no photographs, no name for a man no one could no one could describe. But it would raise a lot of questions, undercut that memoir you're writing. Randolph laughed and rose with a graceful, fluid swirl of her gray and white skirt. I can't believe that you're naive, Lieutenant. After all the things that were written about you and Oscar Newman when he died, world-renowned artist leaves everything to a city cop. Had you rushed a book into print, I'm sure it would have been a bestseller. The public loves Celsius gossip, she added with amusement as Sigurd willed herself not to let either Hence or Randolph see how uncomfortable that taunt made her. The storm that had building broke as sheets of rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Randolph stepped behind the mirrors to refill her glass, then lingered at the windows to watch the rain for a moment before returning to her seat. So the $500 wasn't an attempt to buy his silence? Asked Hence when Sigurd didn't respond to Randolph's words. The soprano smiled at him and placed her goblet back on the low table before her. Actually, it was Detective Hence, and to be quite honest, I think Jack did hope to blackmail me, but he was too decent to make a blatant demand. I don't understand, Hence said. Not blackmail, Sigurd said, but it really was a first installment, wasn't it? To buy his temporary silence. Randolph lightly clapped her hands. Brava, Lieutenant. Hence continued to look puzzled, so Randolph enlightened him. My book will be published next April, and I want it to deliver a bombshell on the day it's published, not dribble out like little firecrackers sputtering on the sidewalks for months in advance. Even my editor doesn't know the true story of how I came to sing Mimi that night. At the very last minute, I'll add one chapter and one extra picture. Then boom. As if to underscore her words, a brilliant flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by an almost instant crack of thunder. Rain fell even heavier, and wind whipped through Randolph's garden to plaster leaves against the glass. "You'd destroy your own legend?" asked Hence. "Not destroy, to enhance it, spice it up. Think of it. Unknown singer and well-known gangster. The media will love it. Yes, if it had come out back then, I might have been harmed, lost some bookings, even been fired or blacklisted, and Marta Constanza certainly wouldn't have become my friend. But now, I think they'll find it romantic." "What about Ms. Delvicho?" Sigurd asked. "Will she find it so amusingly romantic? Sophia and I made a bargain years ago, when her husband gave you this house." Charlotte Randolph arched a beautifully shaped eyebrow. "You did do your research, didn't you?" She lifted her glass and stared into the pale golden wine. If you wanted to be crude, you could say that this house was payment for services rendered. In return, I promised to be discreet and keep my affair with Benny a complete secret. Living in this house so close to his helped us do that, except in the very beginning, before anyone noticed that I wasn't his usual chorus girl. We were never seen in public together. She smiled as if remembering. He would dress in patched overalls and a workman's cap while I wore an ugly cotton dress and bobby socks. We'd spend an afternoon at Coney Island riding the roller coaster and eating hot dogs. Then we'd come back here to drink champagne while I sang for him. Or we'd slip away for a weekend to some city where no one knew us. And Ms. Delvicho accepted this. She had what she wanted, Randolph said coolly. His name, his child, the respect of their community. I took nothing she valued, and I did not publicly embarrass her. It was strictly quid pro quo. Did you know that Benny Olds was going to have that other singer tripped and sent to the hospital? Asked Hence. Of course not. Then why did he trick Franklin McCall into coming to that particular performance? The one night that you would be covering instead of Petra Savos. The crystal goblet slid from Randolph's fingers and splashed wine across her skirt, then bounced without breaking on the white carpet beneath her. White-faced, she stared at Hence. How on earth do you know about Petra Savos? Who is Petra Savos? Asked Sigrid. The soprano who was supposed to be covering for Marta Constanza. For some reason, she couldn't be reached that evening. Did Benny make it worth her while not to answer her phone? Oh, please, said Randolph, who had recovered her poise and was now mopping her skirt with some paper cocktail napkins from a silver box on the coffee table. She retrieved her glass and put the wet napkins into it. You credit him with planning something that complicated? Benny Olds ran a large and complicated operation, said Hence. Until he was gunned down by the Gambinos, he was usually 2 or 3 moves ahead of the others. He probably would have made one hell of a chess player. Did he play? Not. Charlotte Randolph slowly shook her head. Not chess, detective. Bridge. And he never lost count of the cards. She stood and fluffed the thin material of her skirt to help it dry. If there are no more questions, she said, clearly ready to show them out. Sigurd remained seated. You make a good case for not wanting Jack Bloss dead, she conceded. But he is dead, from an overdose of warfarin. So we still want to see your bottle of Coumadin. Oh, really, Lieutenant? Hence stood. We have a takeout box with traces of Coumadin that held lasagna from your refrigerator with your fingerprints on it, Miss Randolph. We also have money from the dead man's pocket with your fingerprints as well. That's enough grounds for a search warrant, which would allow us to take your house apart piece by piece. Would you like to call your attorney? Sigurd asked. See if he can come after all. With a gesture of irritated capitulation, Charlotte Randolph stomped over to the glass and chrome staircase and started up. They're in my bathroom. Sigurd shot an amused glance at Hence and murmured, I thought the only usable fingerprints on the lasagna box were from our victims. He grinned. It was several minutes before Randolph descended the staircase, her lipstick refreshed and her chin high. And before you ask, neither my niece nor my stepson went upstairs when they were here Monday. They dropped off the lasagna and left almost immediately. She handed Hence the little orange prescription bottle, and he read the label aloud. Warfarin sodium, 2 milligrams. The bottle had held 90 pills and would require authorization from her doctor for a refill. At the moment, it seemed to hold about 10 or 12 small lavender pills. I suppose you feel the need to count them, she said. I take one a day on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then 2 on the other 4 days. You can do the math. Actually, said Hent, it would be simpler just to see how many are missing from your new refill. She started to protest, but Hent showed Sigurd the date on the label. Her druggist will have already asked for permission to refill it, and I doubt if she lets herself run completely out. May we see your new bottle, Miss Randolph? Sigurd asked. With a sigh, Charlotte Randolph yielded to Hens's logic. This time she was back much quicker than before. It's those wretched child-proof caps, she told them. I have a touch of arthritis in my thumbs, and I always have trouble getting them off. Last week I spilled 6 or 7 pills down the sink, so when you asked to see them, I topped off that first bottle so you wouldn't think I was the one who poisoned Jack. 81, said Hentz as he finished counting and poured the pills back into the bottle. 9 missing, 18 milligrams. Sigurd said, Did you know Matty Mouton? The other man that died? No, how would I? He was Mrs. Delvicho's godson. You live so close to her. Haven't you stayed in touch? We were never in touch, Lieutenant, except through Benny. We don't spit on each other if we pass in the street, but we could never be friends. Hens capped the pill bottle and left it on the table. Did you send condolences when their daughter died last December? Aria? I didn't know her. Not really. I met her a few times when she came backstage with him to get his program signed, but I didn't try to charm her. So far as she knew, I was just someone her father liked to see perform at the Met or at a concert hall. She was a pretty little thing, but I've never been very good with children, and we had no reason to meet after he died. So you wouldn't know about relationships in the Delvicho household? Absolutely not. Does she know that you're going to write about your affair with her husband? Randolph nodded. But I don't see that this has any bearing on Jack's death, Lieutenant. So now, if you don't mind, I really am rather tired. They all looked to the window wall where rain pounded against the glass. I'll lend you an umbrella, she said. And that's the end of chapter 20, and I will see you tomorrow for chapter 21. And as always, have a wonderful day.